I was staring out of the glass wall of my office when my phone buzzed on the desk. The city below was alive in its usual rhythm. Traffic lights blinking, people rushing across sidewalks, the distant hum of sirens. My silk blouse clung lightly to my skin. I'd been in back-to-back meetings all morning, and the faint trace of my perfume was the only softness in the room filled with contracts, deadlines, and numbers. The name flashing on my phone screen made my chest tighten. Ethan. My brother. The CEO my parents had chosen. I let it ring for a few seconds, just listening to the vibration against the polished wood, before I finally swiped to read the message. We need to talk. Urgent. Call me back. For a moment, I just stared at those words, my manicured nails tapping against the desk. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Urgent? After years of silence? After the way they had dismissed me, as though my ambitions were nothing more than childish dreams? The irony wasn't lost on me. Out there, the business world knew me as a calm, composed woman who could negotiate million-dollar deals without blinking. But in here, in the quiet corners of my heart, I carried scars my family had carved into me. I slid the phone aside, leaned back in my leather chair, and exhaled slowly. If Ethan was reaching out now, something must have gone terribly wrong. I was 24 the night everything changed. We were gathered in the living room of my parents' house in Connecticut, the same house where every family decision had always been made, whether it was about which college I'd attend or who would drive the family car. That evening, it was about the company. My father cleared his throat, holding his glass of scotch the way he always did when he was about to announce something final. My mother sat beside him, lips pressed into a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Your brother will be stepping in as CEO, my father said. Just like that. No discussion, no vote, no acknowledgement of the years I'd spent working in the shadows of that very business. The words hit me like a slap. My throat tightened and I swallowed hard, but the lump refused to go down. My hands shook where they rested in my lap, nails digging into my palms. Dad, I managed, my voice cracking. I've been with the company longer than Ethan. I've brought in clients, managed accounts. I thought. You're good, Claire, my mother interrupted, soft but firm, as if she were consoling a child. But Ethan has the presence, the authority. People see him as a leader. Leader. The word burned. Did they not see how many nights I'd stayed late, how many weekends I'd spent hunched over spreadsheets while Ethan was out with friends? Ethan smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. Don't take it personally. You're just better in support roles. You make people comfortable. I make people listen. That was it. That was the moment I realized I was invisible in their eyes. A daughter destined to stand in the background while my brother shone under the spotlight they handed him. I excused myself before the tears betrayed me. Upstairs in my old bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the faded wallpaper. My chest ached with humiliation, anger, and grief all tangled together. That's when I saw it, the small wooden jewelry box on my dresser. Inside was my grandmother's bracelet, silver with delicate etchings of ivy leaves. She had given it to me on my graduation day, pressing it into my palm with words I hadn't truly understood until now. Never let them tell you what you're worth. Only you decide that. I fastened it around my wrist with trembling fingers. And in that moment I knew. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table anymore. I would build my own. The next morning, I packed my things and walked away from that house, from the company, from their approval, from everything I thought defined me. Starting over wasn't glamorous. My first apartment in New York was a one-bedroom walk-up with cracked paint on the walls and pipes that groaned every time I turned on the shower. At night, I could hear the couple next door arguing through the thin plaster. But it was mine. Every rent check scraped together from waitressing, side gigs, and a tiny consulting project I had managed to land on sheer persistence. Those first months were brutal. I questioned myself constantly. My resume felt small without the family name attached. I spent long nights staring at my laptop, drinking cheap coffee, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Then one day, opportunity walked in wearing red heels. Her name was Victoria Green, a sharp, seasoned businesswoman with a reputation for cutting through nonsense. I had pitched her firm 3 times before she finally agreed to meet me. When she sat across from me in that cafe, her dark eyes scanned me the way my father used to look at balance sheets, searching for numbers that added up. "You're hungry," she said after hearing my ideas. "That's good. Hunger gets you in the door. But discipline, that's what keeps you inside." She became my first real mentor. Victoria gave me projects no one else wanted, tedious, complicated, impossible ones. And I threw myself into them. Nights blurred into mornings. My fingers cramped from typing, my eyes stung from staring at spreadsheets, but I delivered. Every time. The first win came quietly. A small logistics company I helped restructure turned profitable within months. The owner shook my hand with tears in his eyes, and I walked home that night feeling taller than the skyscrapers around me. Then came another client. And another. Slowly, my name began to circulate in the kind of rooms my family thought I'd never belong to. I rented a tiny office, just 2 desks and a coffee maker, but it was enough to feel legitimate. I posted little on social media. A vague update here, a blurry photo of another long night there. I never mentioned contracts, clients, or dollar amounts. Let them think I was dabbling, struggling, invisible.
I wanted it that way.
My success was mine, not for their validation. But I'll never forget the first major contract, a 6-figure deal with a national retailer. When I signed the papers, I slipped my grandmother's bracelet higher up my wrist and whispered, "I decide my worth." It wasn't easy. There were weeks I wanted to quit, nights I cried into my pillow, mornings I doubted everything. Men in boardrooms dismissed me, called me sweetheart, or asked if my boss would be joining the call. But I pushed back, smiled through clenched teeth, and kept building. Year by year, the numbers grew. My company grew. I grew. And all the while my family never asked. Not once. To them, I had disappeared. To me, I was finally becoming visible to myself. When Ethan's text arrived on my phone, I knew sooner or later we'd end up face to face. I didn't rush to reply. I let him wait. By the end of that week, though, my assistant buzzed me. "Claire, there are 3 visitors in the lobby," she said carefully. "They say they're your family." For a moment, my pulse spiked. Then I straightened, smoothing my silk blouse, as if suiting up for battle. "Send them in." The glass doors opened, and there they were, my parents, impeccably dressed as always, and Ethan in his tailored suit. Except this time, there were no smug smiles. His eyes looked hollow, his posture less certain. They entered my office like strangers walking into a cathedral. Their gazes darted across the space, the high ceilings, the polished walnut desk, the abstract art glowing under soft lights. My framed degrees lined one wall, next to photos of my team, and a glass cabinet displayed awards I'd won quietly over the years. My mother's eyes widened. My father's jaw tensed. Ethan's lips parted, as if he wanted to speak, but didn't know how. I stayed silent, letting them drink it all in. The silence was heavy, almost theatrical. For years, I had been the quiet one, the overlooked one. Now, silence was my stage. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Claire, this is quite impressive." "Is it?" I asked lightly, leaning back in my chair. Because I was under the impression that I wasn't leadership material, that people wouldn't see me as a CEO. My mother's face paled. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He was the first to break. "Claire, listen. We've had a setback. The contract with Westbrook Manufacturing, $750,000, slipped through our fingers. They went with another firm." I folded my hands, watching them without blinking. Yes, they did. 3 pairs of eyes snapped toward me. I allowed the silence to stretch a beat longer, then dropped the truth like a stone into still water. They went with me. My firm. I closed that deal last week. The color drained from Ethan's face. My mother gasped softly. My father's brows furrowed, as though the math didn't add up. "You?" Ethan whispered. "But how?" "By doing what you never thought I could," I said. My voice was calm, measured, but underneath it was years of swallowed pain finally crystallized into strength. By working harder than you imagined, by listening, by learning, by refusing to disappear just because you handed me silence. My mother's hand trembled as she clutched her pearls. Claire, we didn't know. No, I replied softly. You didn't want to know. It was easier to assume I'd failed, that I'd crawl back begging for a place at your table. But I built my own. The room fell into a stunned hush. I let them sit in it. The disbelief, the shame, the dawning realization that the daughter they had dismissed was the woman standing in front of them now, holding their future in her hands. Finally, I rose from my chair. The click of my heels on the hardwood echoed like a gavel. I walked to the window, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass. You came here today because you need me, not the other way around. When I turned back to face them, my grandmother's bracelet gleamed under the office lights, catching their eyes. It was more than jewelry now, it was proof. Proof of everything they'd missed, everything I had claimed for myself. Their silence was the sweetest victory I had ever tasted. For a long moment, no one spoke. My family stood there, framed by the elegance of an office they never imagined I could own. They looked smaller somehow, not because they were weak, but because I was no longer willing to shrink for them. Ethan finally broke the silence. Claire, we need your help. If we don't recover this contract, the company could spiral. His voice cracked. I don't know how to fix it. Once, I would have rushed to patch his wounds, to prove myself worthy of their approval. But not anymore. I had learned the hard way that saving everyone else while losing yourself is the fastest path to emptiness. I walked back to my desk, each step deliberate, my heels steady against the floor. I sat down, folded my hands, and met their eyes. If I help, it will be on my terms, not yours. My father stiffened. Terms? Yes, I said firmly. For years, you decided my worth without ever asking who I really was. That ends today. If you want me involved, you will accept my conditions. My mother looked uneasy, but nodded slowly. What conditions? I took a breath. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. About setting boundaries that should have existed long ago. First, I said, locking eyes with my father, you acknowledge my role. Not just as a daughter, not as support, but as a leader. If I come in as an equal. He swallowed hard but said nothing. Second, I turned to Ethan. You learn to stand without leaning on entitlement. You've been given power your whole life. Now, you need to earn it. If we work together, you shadow me. You watch, you learn, and you stop assuming leadership is your birthright. His face flushed, but the flicker of shame in his eyes told me the words had landed. And third, I said, softer now, looking at both of them, you stop dismissing the women in this family.
Me, Mom.
Anyone. We don't exist to decorate the edges of your empire. We're the empire. If you can't accept that, then you don't deserve my help. Silence followed, heavy but necessary. My words hung in the air like iron and silk at once, strong, but woven with compassion. I don't want to destroy you, I added quietly. I want us to grow. But growth requires change. And if you can't change, then I'll walk away again. This time for good. My mother's eyes glistened. My father's jaw clenched, pride warring with realization. Ethan looked at me not as his little sister, but as the woman who now held the ground beneath his feet. For the first time in years, the balance had shifted. And I was no longer the one left begging at the edge of the table. I was setting the table myself. The days that followed felt strange, like the ground itself had shifted. For the first time, my family wasn't dictating the narrative, they were listening. Really listening. My father, once so unyielding, called me late one evening. His voice carried none of the authority I'd grown up fearing. Instead, it carried humility. Claire, he said, pausing as though the words weighed more than he was used to carrying. I was wrong. About you. About everything. I see it now. My mother came to visit my office alone one afternoon. She didn't come with polished excuses or rehearsed smiles. She came with questions. Real ones. How did you do it? She asked, her voice soft. How did you build all this? For once, she looked at me not as her daughter to manage, but as a woman she admired. And Ethan, well, his change came the slowest. But I saw it in small ways. He asked me to review his presentations. He stopped interrupting in meetings. He watched, he learned. And though pride still tugged at his shoulders, I knew the cracks were forming in his armor. As for me, I finally felt free. Free of the need to prove, free of the weight of invisibility. My success was no longer a secret, but it wasn't just about the contracts or the numbers. It was about standing tall in my own worth, no matter who tried to dim it. One quiet evening, long after the office had emptied, I sat by the window with the city lights blinking like stars scattered across glass. I slipped off my grandmother's bracelet and turned it in my hands. The silver was worn now, the ivy engravings softened with time. Her words echoed through me as if she were still sitting beside me. Never let them tell you what you're worth. Only you decide that. I smiled, fastening it back onto my wrist. She had been right all along. The girl who once trembled in her parents' living room was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth and would never hand that power away again. I leaned back, letting the silence settle, then whispered the final truth to myself, a truth I knew would echo in every deal, every meeting, every step forward. They chose my brother as CEO. But I chose myself, and that choice made me everything they said I could never be.